Welcome, everyone, to the Nerd Journey Podcast, episode 111. We're joining you every week to talk IT career progression and bring you the advice we wish we'd been given earlier in our careers. I'm your host, John White, at BJourneyman on Twitter, joined by my co-host, Nick Cordy, at NetworkNerd_. Hey, Nick, how's it going?
Hey, John, I'm doing great. We are both pre-sales technical engineers with backgrounds in IT operations. We hope our career discussions will be vendor neutral, relevant across disciplines, and remain timeless. If you're enjoying our content, please drop us a positive review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you subscribe. And if you want to get in touch with us, tweet or DM at Nerd Journey. Ultimately, we're just two nerds on a journey.
A journey to virtual enlightenment.
So let's take a trip.
Awesome, Nick. Hey, so this week we have Caitlyn Bryan, who is an enterprise client exec at VMware. And I think we're talking to her in two parts, right?
Of course. Nerd Journey interviews come in two parts, John. It's like a rule or something like that. But I actually know Caitlyn. So I was her solution engineer for about a year in the commercial segment at VMware not too long ago. So we did work together, and some of that will come out in the episode. But I thought it was really interesting to see how she ended up in this technical sales field and a little bit about her progression path along the way out to the field and customer-facing operations and day-to-day.
Yeah, so just as a tease, I think we've talked to a few people before who are a little bit more technically oriented, although we have talked to at least one other salesperson. It'd be interesting to listen to the pattern. Like, do you hear a pattern of how people get into the technology industry, whether it's as sales engineers or as field sales executives? I think it was also really interesting kind of maybe towards the second half of this conversation that we're going to have today about underrepresentation of women in tech and like maybe some of the real world experiences of that and maybe some things that we can all think about and look out for.
Absolutely. Good stuff.
Cool.
So let's not ruin it. Part 1 with Caitlyn Bryan. Here we go.
Caitlyn Bryan, thanks for joining us on the Nerd Journey podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Can you maybe start out by telling us what your current position is and what you do?
Sure. So I am an enterprise account executive at VMware. I cover some of the largest customers in the DFW area, based here in Dallas, and then covering the entire portfolio for VMware.
Got it. So that's more of a pure sales position than maybe some of the other people that we've talked to that had a little bit more of like on the technical side, technical pre-sales.
Yeah, exactly.
Got it. Can you maybe tell us a little bit about how you got into the tech industry and why you like working in the tech industry?
So that was a very interesting, come to be moment. So I was in college and I couldn't figure out how to plug in a printer. And I went to our advisor and asked, is there a class that I can take that helps with just understanding technology? And this was in 2007. So probably should have known a little bit more about plugging in a printer at the time, but I didn't. So I somehow got on this track of coding and implementing SAP software. And I thought it was fascinating. But I really enjoyed the personal aspect of being able to talk to people. I was a marketing major with information systems minor, and everyone at my college couldn't figure out what in the world I was going to do with both of those combined. And I myself didn't know that this industry even really existed at the time. So it was kind of happenstance. One of my sister's friends happened to work for another vendor at the time. And she said, hey, you get to, learn about tech, and something I definitely became interested in after the first kind of coding class. I was kind of hooked. But then you also get to travel and go and meet people and kind of the warm and fuzzies of being a salesperson, very extroverted. individual. So I got somehow wrangled into this world, and it's something that I wasn't aware of before, but it's been such a fun time. So just a few years later, I started at VMware, and I guess I've been with VMware for, it'll be going on 6 years here in August. And so the growth of the industry, the competitive nature of the industry, the people that you get to talk to and the places you get to travel to are really inspiring, from just a why in the world this industry. I love the fast pace of it, but then also not knowing that this industry even exists kind of goes back to how'd you stumble in it? And that's one of my first questions that I ask my customers, or specifically like women, in the industry. How in the world did you guys figure out this big giant cool thing happening? Because it certainly wasn't talked about in a small town Northeast Arkansas where I grew up.
That's so interesting. Like I never really thought about it until now, but just like you probably don't go to college to become like a sales engineer.
Yeah.
Like people usually don't go to college to become like a enterprise technology salesperson.
No.
Right. So I don't even know what the typical like pathway to get a job like that is. Like I guess marketing and then business development.
Stumbling into it, maybe. Yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
somebody hired on a new college graduate, and a lot of the bigger tech firms would have new college kids, and you're going to teach them up and coach them and, produce them into these amazing individuals. And so I was super lucky to be accepted into one of those programs, not even knowing really what a server was back then. So it just kind of rolled into it, which was pretty cool. But yeah, they don't really talk about it too much in school.
And I think in those programs, and correct me if I'm wrong, Caitlin, but I think they start you out on the inside, which means that you're in an office somewhere and you're kind of on the phone all day, don't make a
Yeah.
lot of in-person visits to your customers, and then you slowly progress out to that field-facing,
Exactly.
big time, if you will, customer role.
Yeah, I was inside sales for a good majority of my first portion of the career, just understanding, one, what is it? Two, you've got a huge team of people that have tons of industry experience, customers who just want to check in with people, and so you're not really bound by catching a flight and going and shaking hands and grabbing drinks or whatever it is. So the inside sales is super important, and even inside engineering, inside whoever. So I definitely will never knock it. It's how I got started in my career, and pretty proud of that. And you just learn so much about just the people around you, and then as you grow, you kind of get a little bit, if you go into the field route, you kind of end up on your own little island, if you will, especially with, COVID. So inside sales was definitely a way that you can meet people in the office of like-minded experiences, and then really grow within your career while also getting some experience.
Did you find that there was like more of a cultural like adaptation with an inside position? Like if you're all going to the same place, and then you're working on the same types of things in the same location, and then chatting with each other, and maybe having people coming and giving presentations, like it's sometimes a little bit easier to get the culture of the organization than it is when you like if you just join as a field person and never go into the office, or hardly ever go in.
Yeah, I mean, you look at just being inundated with the executives will come in, and the marketing teams put a ton of focus on the inside. You have like really that cultural movement, if you will, like at VMware, the inside teams, we had birthday party every month. You knew that the bundt cakes were going to be sent to you. You're going to have an end of quarter kickoff with your vice presidents and executives, and kind of everybody having that camaraderie, which is so important, especially if you think about if you're brand new into your career, or even if you've been there for a long time, but you need that interaction and that experience. of others that you can kind of build off of. Super cool. And then I think about the people that I work with all the time. I mean, my previous bosses came from the inside, their bosses came from the inside. So it kind of gives this little, I mean, you feel like a little bit of an underdog at times, but then at the same time, you learn the ins and outs of the culture of, how to get things done, especially like operationally. If you've got, somebody that's been there for a long time sitting right next to you in the cube, that's really important. So I think it was fun. It's definitely fun to go back. Whenever that offices open back up, it'll be fun to go back and kind of see the new and improved teams that are there. So it's something that I've been lucky to be able to do an inside coach perspective. So going out and talking at our start training, which is like our welcome to the company, hoorah, drink the Kool-Aid situation. So I got to be a coach and just looking at the energy that kind of comes from the inside, or the brand new college new hires. It kind of revives you if you've been doing kind of the same thing over and over. So I think I answered your
Yeah.
question, but sorry if I
So
rambled.
true about the energy of talking to someone who's looking at it with fresh eyes. And along those lines, Caitlin, can you share with us what makes someone on the inside, if they're doing inside sales, what makes them want to pursue a field-facing role over staying on the inside?
Yeah. So I can't speak for everyone because sometimes it can be super important to not have, there might not be aspirations for a field, or there might be something, you want to do something different, or the inside's rocking and rolling. I think it comes down to, one, I was super excited about just feeling the passion within the deal, like being the alpha, if you will, and being in charge as the field person. But then also like getting to sit in front of your customers and interact is so important. And you kind of get that personal aspect of when you're at a table or in a conference room, and then, maybe you go and grab dinner afterwards. There's just that instant camaraderie, something that I think that as salespeople, we are craving so much right now, especially with, this is our whole new world. So I think that piece I've definitely missed. But then also, there's a compensation perspective, field versus inside. That's always interesting. And then, you look at maybe if you wanted to stay locally within one market, say there's a big hub of people in Austin and you want to live in Austin, there might not be that many field facing resources, but inside you've got an amazing resource pool. You've got a good gig. So it might be the better fit for you.
I think both Nick and I have spoken with people who were interested in field-facing roles with VMware in Austin, and it was like one of the harder positions to get because you were competing with everybody who was in that like local, like I guess maybe I should back up and explain that VMware has like a large local inside sales force in Austin. So, that also means inside SEs
Yep.
and inside partner marketing and partner positions.
Yeah.
So if you wanted to cover Austin in a field role, you're competing with every single one of those people who wants to stay in Austin and
Yeah.
also has like those years of experience with VMware and maybe are in fairly senior positions as an inside person and just happens to want to move into the field.
Yeah, as soon as those roles open up, I mean, you've got now, there's so many tech companies there in Austin. Luckily, that's not where I knew I wanted to land for a long term. I'm originally from Arkansas, so Austin didn't have a direct flight at the time. And, it was an 8-hour haul to get home for Christmas, an 8-hour haul to get back. So being a little bit closer to home was great for me. But yeah, as soon as those Austin roles open up, I mean, you've got Google now that's got, a lot of people there. You've got Apple, you've got, Tesla's just coming up. There's a huge market. And so sometimes, and I'll have, some of the maybe inside people that want to move to the field and, we'll have a quick, like, I wouldn't call myself a mentor, but, we'll have a little check-in of how did you get to where you're going. And sometimes it's okay to like be open with maybe a different region if you're not necessarily married to staying in a highly coveted position. Go stretch your legs in, Arkansas, Oklahoma, like where I love, but maybe there's not a lot of people that have that same familiarity with the region. But a great way for you to be able to make a big impact, and then also get the experience that you need, because sometimes it's really hard. Actually, it's very hard to make the jump from inside to the field. You have to have kind of all of the things lined up. You've got to have successes. You've got to have your leadership experience, kind of internally within the company. It seems like that's the easier hop, because trying to get, let's say you're at company A and you're doing inside and then trying to jump to company B, on the field perspective, the recruiters or maybe the hiring manager is going to look and go, well, what experience do you have? So that's kind of hard. And luckily at the time I had an awesome vice president and director that let me, you talked about like the open sales gap. So there might not be a rep, an AE in the geo. But I was able to go and do some customer calls like on, because there wasn't a field rep. So I was able to kind of be the hybrid person. And then going with my engineer just to make sure I didn't screw it up too bad was, was great. But those little moments of, how do you make the jump? How do you kind of champion yourself within your leadership teams? It's hard. But it can be really rewarding.
It feels like one of those things, like it's difficult to imagine building all those support networks for yourself,
Yeah.
like from scratch. Do you think that it's important, maybe when choosing an organization, to find out whether they have like a formalized program, or is that even something that exists?
I think some people do have it. I don't know. The office that, I was at, originally, they had kind of like a field readiness fast track or something like that. That actually was my former boss, who's now my peer. He ran at the time, and he had just done a field gig and came back to coach up the inside teams. It was super cool just to get kind of that real life exposure. But I mean, looking for companies, and before I landed into, VMware, I was looking for that culture that kind of helped to build everybody up. So that would absolutely be, now that you say it, I'm thinking, man, that's a really great idea or advice for people that are, looking for, how do I make sure that I land in the right company? How do I make sure that I have the right kind of support? Is looking for things like mentorships or coaching fast tracks, or I don't know what you would call it. Maybe the HR individuals would have some sort of, headway into that. But definitely those types of things. You want to come off as being a real go-getter, but you also don't want to be like an ankle biter. So there's like a very weird fine line. So some of those fast tracks, I'm sure, could help to formulate some ideas and real like next steps for you.
That's always an interesting line to walk, right? Like, especially during an interview process, and you get the inevitable, where do you see yourself in 5 years, type of question.
Yeah.
That, like, I think what you just said, maybe one of those good answers to give would be, well, I want to be doing, I think my standard answer was like, I want to be doing what I'm doing now, but better, be doing it better, but now that I think about it, if I were to ever go through that again, I would want to be able to say something like, and one of the things that I'm looking for in an organization is, kind of a formal or semi-formal process to help me get there,
Yeah.
and, to that next level.
Yeah. Oh, and you think about tech, and it's such an incestuous industry anyway. So once you're there, you kind of don't really leave. No one really leaves tech unless they want to go and, I don't know, go fishing or scuba diving pro or something, very, very offbeat. But, you think about this industry, there's so much knowledge. There's not a whole lot of brand new people kind of coming in from, my husband works for maintenance, repair, and operations, huge customer of ours, but large company. And you think about just those individuals don't even know that tech is coming in. So it's kind of interesting to see, like, how do you even kind of continue to build your career and your network, and at the same time, like, getting new blood in.
Yeah, I can definitely see that it's a problem that's trying to be addressed, right? Like, how do you grow an enterprise sales rep, from the ground up internally? Like,
Hmm.
how do you, even to the point of like hiring somebody out of college and then over the course of, 5 years, 6 years, getting them there?
Yeah,
I mean, that's a hard problem.
yeah. Nurturing opportunities, I think, is really important. Strong managers that are looking for your career advice, or how do you make sure that you get a mentor? Those are always really important. I'm currently in the process of looking for a new one, so if y'all think of anybody, let me know.
There's the organizations that I've seen do this, like the one that I can think of that does this like fairly regularly is Oracle.
Hmm.
And it's almost like they pair an inside person with a field uh, enterprise, salesperson, and they're actually both field people, but like one is the apprentice and one is the master,
Yeah.
right? It's like a master apprentice system, and they like take notes and they do a lot of the pricing and quote creation and um, organize a lot of the stuff. And it's like, oh, you kind of have to learn by doing, and then having somebody model it for you
Right.
over like a medium to long period of time
Yeah.
might be like, well, maybe it's like one of the ways. I don't know if it's the best way, but
That's definitely, it was kind of my experience. Like, you're saddled up to, I guess, your counterpart in region, and then you've got your specialists in region, and then you've also got your specialists on your, maybe in the same office that you share, and then there's actually, one of our partners, and it's the inverse. So the individual that's kind of running the show or the relationship for 15 years or so, is the inside person, and they have different field facing resources. So kind of depends on, like, I guess, the company too, because it could be the opposite. I've only seen one other company like that, but yeah, the inside person kind of is the puppeteer, if you will, and then has their individuals in geo.
But you can absolutely learn a ton by just shadowing somebody in those
Totally.
kinds of conversations, seeing how they carry themselves, how they have easy and hard conversations with customers and other
Yeah.
internal people, how they get other people to do things they want without those people actually working for them. If
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Leverage the extended team with your mind control capabilities.
Yeah, didn't we have Nick? We used to have a lot of people from, like, the inside engineering teams that would come out and shadow a couple of meetings, and I can't remember the names, but we had several people that
Hmm.
would hang out here in DFW, and they'd be here for a couple of days and go, okay, take me to a customer meeting, or take me to a
Yeah.
partner meeting, and then everybody was just, I mean, you feel like you're in it, you're so excited to learn, and then seeing that, maybe it's not just necessarily inside. I don't know why we're going down this necessarily tangent, but the new individuals to the career, and that's like,
Hmm.
you feel that excitement, you kind of get re-energized that what you're doing is so cool, and so it's kind of like a fun little thing to have different people kind of insert within your opportunities.
Yeah. That was part of the academy program actually that you talked about
Exactly.
earlier.
Yeah.
So they have it, for different roles, whether it's a sales person, whether it's a solution engineer, whether it's technical account manager. I think they even do it in many other areas, at least at VMware. I'm sure that other companies have a similar offering, but you're right. It's always exciting and interesting when some of those new faces are trying to learn what you do and how to do that job. And then they ask you questions and you kind of go, I didn't think about that. I
Yeah.
should probably know the answer to that. It's a great
Exactly.
way for you to learn too.
Yeah. And I know when I got to the Academy program at VMware, so cool. You've got some of the brightest people that are starting their career, and they've got either professional services or engineering or sales, and you're kind of like divvied up within your group. And it's so interesting to watch because they'll fly them to headquarters and they'll do, I mean, in a normal world, non-pandemic year, they'll get to go and, drink the Kool-Aid, but you'll see our CEO come through, our CIO come through, all of our leadership team. So that's their first experience that like, oh, congratulations, you're here. You have direct access to all C levels at any company, and so cool. And so you see that and you're like, okay, that's not exactly what I experienced, but very cool. So I remember like I was interviewed as one of the sponsors 2 years ago, and I flew out, and I can't remember who asked the question, but hey, tell me about like a really bad day. Like, do you ever cry in front of customers, or, do you ever do whatever? And so it was so interesting to see like that could be their first real experience into what is a field versus inside versus, the pressure that can be within sales. So kind of interesting.
Yeah, speaking of maybe kind of bad days, Caitlin, hopefully you don't mind me asking this, but as a female in a traditionally male dominated space,
Yeah.
certainly we don't want that to be the case, but uh, how have the challenges with that been different in your progression from inside to the field and customer facing situations? I think people
Yeah.
would really enjoy hearing about that.
Yeah, so I've got so many thoughts on. I think it'd probably be like a 7-part series questionnaire. But so one of the things that, just being a woman in tech, we are so underrepresented that it's wild. So you'll go to the great thing is I feel like you can find a female mentor a little bit easier, or kind of command a little bit more of the questioning attention. But then also you've got really short lines in the bathroom. So if you're at VMworld or a convention and you see there's a 15-minute wait out of the men's restroom, and then you walk in and you're walking right back out, no lines ever. So that's a super positive. But I would say that, when you look at how did you get into the industry? I think we obviously need to figure out how to get more girls interested in STEM, or if they are interested, like I just kind of happened to stumble upon this because I couldn't figure out a printer. But the tech world is a little bit more maybe word of mouth, maybe not necessarily now than it used to be. But a lot of people don't know that this even exists and this is an opportunity for females. So I think that that's a little bit on us, on, coaching up our neighbors' kids or our kids, or people in our community that we happen to know, and kind of leaning forward a little bit and making sure that everybody's aware. But at the same time, looking at like from, I guess, a personal aspect of things, is you feel like you almost have to have a tough exterior in order to become the alpha, and then not seem like you're being like led from an emotional state, or maybe an irrational state. So I think there's a little bit of a stigma. Most of my clients are great, most of the people that I've worked with, but sometimes you'll find people that might think that you're there to deliver the coffee, or you can take some notes if you'd like to. So I had an issue. I was right out of college, and I was in a conference room. So I was really excited, probably 24, 25. And I was there with customers, and someone who happened to be there, not a customer, asked me to go pick up coffee for everybody and lay out the napkins. And it was my hosted meeting. And so you kind of like get thrown off a little bit. And that happens pretty infrequently. It's been like, once. But you have to do things that are a little bit unnatural. Like, I don't bring in coffee ever. I'll have it delivered, but you'll never see me. And I think, Nick, you probably know this rule about me, and that's why, is I'm not there to be the waitress. And so I think that's such an unfair thing to say, but it's also like something that we're aware of, is just you can't even like let on to that. So I think that that's a total, like my husband would never think about that, like bringing donuts in as like that's separating the value from the experience. So that's just something that's I don't know if I'm rambling, but something that's definitely different.
I see what you're saying, that you might like pay for a service to deliver coffee,
Exactly.
but you don't carry coffee in.
Yeah, it's a really weird delineation, but I will let somebody
Hmm.
else set up coffee, pay for it, absolutely. But there
Hmm.
is just this weird thing where if you're the person, the female, the only female in the room most of the time,
Hmm.
or maybe the only female at the company, at your company, at your specialist, your engineers, there might be 20 people in the room and you're the only one. So you don't want to be the one that's setting up the napkins and the coffee and whatever it is because there's just a weird power thing there.
I actually have a follow on comment to that. I can totally identify with what you're saying because I was in a meeting not more than a year ago, and there was someone shadowing me, a female, and she was in the room. Obviously, she was shadowing. She didn't feel like she was adding a lot of value, and she volunteered to go get lunch. And I'm like, look, I don't want you to feel like you have to go get lunch because you're the only girl in the room. Like, I am perfectly capable of doing this or having it delivered. You do not have to go do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is, I am not telling you to go do that. In
Well,
fact, you probably shouldn't go do that.
yeah, and there's a weird thing because we naturally, well, I know I do naturally as a woman. You want to take care of people. You want to make people comfortable. You want to like, you think about things like timing for lunch. I mean, I know what I'm going to have for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Like, hey, what are we doing for, like Nick and I. Nick used to be my engineer, and Nick and I would plan out our day based on meals and who's comfortable with what and where are we going to get the coffee for the day. So you think about those types of things, and maybe it's just something that I recognized very early on in my career that I started to have a little bit of that. Hey, she's here to kind of cater to us. So I had to draw this extreme line in the sand where I don't bring coffee. I'll absolutely have it delivered for you, but that's just a thing that I just do.
I totally understand that. I mean, it makes absolute sense in context, right? Where like you have this experience where you realize that for the next major part of your career, you need to absolutely avoid
Yeah,
being looked on in any way as like
yeah,
almost like a service person,
yeah.
right? So that makes absolute sense to me. I mean, I
Yeah.
had an experience like that where I walked in to a place and I asked, like, I'm here for a meeting, and they like the person asked me if I was doing a delivery. Right? It's like, oh, are you making a delivery? And I was like, no, no.
Like, here for the meeting? Wow.
But it's I don't know. The joke that I always make in that situation, for you is like, were you taking a meeting in the 50s, right? Like
Yeah.
like, hey, can you go get us coffee? Like, what? No, like
Like,
what?
the cool part about that story, though, I will say, is my client at the time recognized what was happening. He was the senior person in the room and kind of checked that other individual and was like, oh, this is actually Caitlyn's meeting. We're here with her hosting, and
Mhm.
asked the guy to go get coffee, who was twice my age at the time. So that was very awkward. But I think that there was a little bit of a weird situation. So, bottom line is, I think in sales, you have this role of like, you want to take care of your customers, you want to take care of people. You're probably an extrovert, which is why you're doing it. So you're pretty comfortable in most situations. But being a woman, and then wanting to, continuously provide that value is just, you just don't want to get stuck delivering coffee or being put in a really weird role. So
It's this interesting issue because in enterprise sales, we often host events, right?
mhm.
Where you are, functionally the host, and you say, come in, like, do this. I'm hosting this event for you.
Yeah,
But there's like, if you think in like formal dining or entertainment or something like that, oftentimes like at a high end event, like the host of the event doesn't like deliver drinks to
no,
people. Like they're there
yeah,
like as the MC to like facilitate conversations, to make connections between people. And it's the same type of thing, right? You want to be perceived as that like high tier, high
Right.
power person
Right.
in the room, not like at that like service level.
Yeah. There's a reason we love some deliveries if you're going to do a lunch and learn or something like that. So that's absolutely, plus your car won't end up like stinking like, breakfast tacos or whatever it is that you need.
I mean, that's a great point. I just never thought about the subtlety between
Yeah.
carrying something in and having it delivered, and how that can change the perception and energy, like walking into a room.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would say maybe the next question would be, we've kind of we've dived deep into this issue of like perception and role and power. There, I'm thinking there have to be other things, right? When being a woman in tech like is just generally an issue. Um, I first of all, I like the shout out to like lines in the bathroom at tech conferences. Like
100%.
I definitely, there's like a person on Twitter who presents at conferences, and every time she's at a conference, she tweets a picture from the women's bathroom where she's like completely alone,
Yeah.
which is hilarious.
Yeah.
Um, but it also seems like there's like this movement within technical conferences to have female speakers, because there's always like a
Hmm.
need for more, and it's like a representation thing. There's like, if you don't see somebody like you on stage or up front, at a general session or at a breakout session, like there's nobody for you to model, and
Yeah.
it stops occurring to people that that's where they could be.
Yeah.
Have you heard about those types of things?
Yeah. I mean, I think that I was at a sales kickoff one year and the whole week. So we've got everyone all across the US, inside, field, you know, engineer, sales, and you get to learn from some of the most amazing people that are doing really cool things with either tech, or maybe they just accomplished a massive deal, or I don't know, somebody from different people. And there was one time that this happened. This was years ago, but not a single woman was on the stage presenting. So one whole entire week, you think about how many sessions you have in a day, maybe 10 to 15 sessions. And I called it out to the, I guess the survey that you get sent, but then also my boss, my boss's boss, my boss's boss's boss. And, that was something that was super, obvious that that was a major gap. And I think that there is this awareness now, and certainly like great missions for people to have more diversification, whether it's color or gender or however you want to identify. But that stood out to me so clearly. And then the next time that we had a kickoff, it was half and half, which was amazing. That there were more female representatives on the stage, and I think that was just that me talking about it, and kind of all of the people in the room that identified that with me, and we kind of all made this big ruckus about it, if you will. And just speaking out that that's not okay, I think that helps to trigger that we do need to do a better job as an industry to celebrate more speakers from different lenses.
Yeah, I mean, the more perspectives you get, the more successful usually
Totally.
as an organization or as an industry you're doing.
Totally.
And I would say any time that like, you raise that issue and someone says, "Ooh, we actually have like we can't source those people," then there's like an even bigger
That
problem.
should be your screeching halt that there's a problem. Absolutely. Yeah. So that's it's so interesting. Like when you do start talking about it, it seems to resonate a little bit more. But that was something that was just mind blowing that that could actually happen. In the last 10 years, that you could have an entire week and not a single person that was spoken to was a woman. So I thought that was a little bit wild.
That's crazy.
We got some
Yeah.
work to do. Yeah.
Yeah.
It sounds like, good progress was made. And I
Yeah.
think one good way of judging an organization is the reaction to feedback like that,
Totally.
right?
Totally.
Because it's very, very easy for people to get defensive and tell you why it's a completely rational thing to have happened.
Yeah.
And it's a difficult and much harder thing to do, to say, ooh, we need to take a step back and go, why did we have that blind spot?
Yeah.
Or, you know,
It's hard. Yeah. I mean, the phrase of no one wants to call their baby ugly. But sometimes you kind of need to call it out if there is an issue, and then, be vocal about how do we fix it. And then I look at, the peers on my team, and I've got one other woman on my team, which is awesome. I used to have just one, but it was just a party of one for a little while. So 2 teams in a row, I think it was party of one for a couple months. And, you think of that as like, that's a little between 8 and 15 people. There's only one female. So that kind of gives you a little bit of an idea of, maybe we should be, as a woman, that's a little bit of my responsibility too, is to talking to my friends, my family, my, neighbors about this industry, and finding great qualified candidates that are going to be able to bring in and start making a little bit of that impact. So it's a little bit, it's not a anti-male here, but I think it's also on us.
Ooh, hate to cut it off there. Really cool conversation with Caitlyn Bryan. I really enjoyed hearing about that entry into technology, that college degree combination of marketing plus computer information science, or computer information services,
Systems.
computer information systems. Like, that is really, it seems like one of the best combinations that you could have to get into technical sales in the technology industry. Whichever happens to be the major, whichever happens to be the minor. Maybe that's like your personality leaning of getting into sales engineering, or maybe field sales. But I just hadn't thought about that before.
Yeah, it's a good combo. I really enjoyed hearing about Caitlyn's progression from the inside sales organization, to where she was making customer calls and not meeting with them in person necessarily, to the field-facing sales organization. And in my mind, I couldn't help but think back to our generalist specialist divide, episode 26, because in a lot of ways, she really moved into an adjacency. It was very similar to what she was doing before, but there were also some very distinct differences. And hearing her talk about how she was able to gain a little bit of experience toward the field-facing role while still doing the inside sales job, and how it helped her progress, I really enjoyed listening to that.
Yeah, it's a really good point. Like, looking for those growth areas, right, in adjacencies. We have talked about that before. We're really on the ball, Nick. Like, we're really good at this. Good job. Virtual high five.
Either that or our guests just know what to say.
That's
It's
true.
not us.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I suppose an alternative is that we say a bunch of things, and then anytime we get any kind of confirmation, we just feel really good about ourselves.
That's right.
Yeah. We'll do some reflection on which one this is.
We need more metrics on that.
Yeah. Really good point. Maybe we should put a Twitter poll up.
Maybe.
Well, regardless, I'm really enjoying listening to this conversation, and I hope people tune in again next week, where we're going to hit a little bit more about taking parental leave, which, is a really interesting thing to be, to experience. Like, probably all of us, to a greater or lesser degree, are going to experience or be adjacent to something along those lines during our careers.
For sure. And before we go, I just want to point out, I had never heard that story that Caitlyn shared about someone asking her to get coffee. That one, I guess it, being a dude, it's not something you think about in the way that it actually impacts how people view her in these situations. And it definitely helped patch a little bit of a blind spot I had. And I also think that it's important, as she said, for all of us to evangelize these STEM type opportunities for any young people we meet, regardless of what they look like or anything like that. We need more talent in the STEM type fields.
It's very true. Like, the idea that we're going to progress as a society, as a country, as the various companies that we're working for, like we need to like find all of the talented people, regardless of gender, age, ethnicity, cultural background, country of origin, um, like any of the things that currently keep people out of the industry. Like we just can't afford to give up on those people, like or rule them out like early on. It's just it's too hard to find talent. I am also I was just really impacted by that story as well. It's like, you know, uh anytime you're asking like somebody a peer for a service, in any way that can make them appear like less than. It's not, I think, maybe like asking somebody to get coffee like is a specific trigger, that goes all the way back to, I think, maybe being more sensitized to that from like maybe like Mad Men, you know, like the, asking women to be in like a service role in a male dominated room or industry. Like that is like, maybe a little bit more obvious, but like there's just got to be other landmines out there that fall into that like general service category. I'm just really glad to hear about that. And, it's pretty thought provoking.
Absolutely.
Cool. Anything else before we get out of here?
No, sir. Just a reminder, we want people to subscribe and give us a positive review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening. We want to know if we're being helpful and are always looking for interesting questions to ponder, like what happens next week. We're collectively on Twitter @NerdJourney.
All right. Farewell, listeners. Tune in next time as the journey continues. I'm John White @VJourneyman, for Nick Cordy @NetworkNerd_, signing off.
Adios.